Hey, it's Jordan with the Young Turks. TYT Politics, barely functioning. Still haven't slept since my jailhouse rocks evening. That night, I slept on a concrete floor for like 15 minutes. The night we got out, I was too drunk to sleep. And then last night, dreams and, demons from the past,
PTSD.
PTSD. So we just wrapped covering a very, I'd say, troubling but still hopeful rally at the Gary, Chicago airport, where they were dropping off more undocumented immigrants to get off a bus where they have the bus painted white. You can't see in the window; they paint it white, and then they're putting those undocumented immigrants on the bus to go down to Brownsville, Texas. Well, they'll basically give them a swift kick in the ass into Mexico. So we were live on Facebook covering that. I am back here in the East Chicago area. Did a few interviews last night. Wanted to follow up today. It's about, I'd say, like a year and a few months since revelations came out that in a government housing complex, 99% African American, of course, they found lead in the soil, upwards of 200 times the allowable limit. Allowable limit is just some nonsense term. It should be zero. So last August, I was there for the first time. I've interviewed people on the ground here. I think this is my, I don't know, sixth time, I think, here. And I think it's obviously important to go to these places like when stuff first comes out. But I also think it's equally important to come a year later, 5 years later, because that's usually when there's no cameras. And that's usually the government just waits till all the attention goes away. And then they're like, okay, now we can fuck these people. I mean, they already fucked them in the first place. But now, like, all right, we don't really have to do anything. So I want to put the attention back on this because, like Flint, which after the initial cameras left, it was considered improving and all that. We're actually on our way back there after this. East Chicago, it's a crisis. I mean, it's a crisis, and people have been sick for years. Now they know why they've been sick. And as you'll see right now, the government is not doing anything for these people. And the little they have done is not enough. So I'm back with Keisha Daniels. We've spoken many times. You're a mother of three. You were living in West Calumet Complex, which was the condemned housing complex, basically built right in the shadow of a lead smelting plant back in the 60s. You didn't know when you moved with your children in there about the crazy levels of lead. They didn't, the EPA and the state never did thorough testing until 2 years ago. And along with, I think, 300 something people who lived in that complex, they basically kept you there till the end, and then even tried to force you to move to a dangerous area in Chicago. So tell me what's happened since we last saw each other. You're obviously in a new home now. Has anything improved? And it seems to me, as I headlined, they've basically moved you from one contaminated area to another.
Yes, they've moved me to zone three now. I moved from zone one to zone three. It's still contaminated. Um,
One
but
sec. So there was three zones: Zone One, Zone Two, Zone Three. Zone One was where West Calumet Complex was. That was the government housing complex where they found the lead at crazy levels. Zone Two and Three are just housing, like actual homes, residential areas.
yeah, so I moved to zone three. Um, it hasn't been tested in the inside. My home still wasn't tested, so I don't know if we have lead or arsenic or anything else inside of the home now. And I live next to a marathon pipeline now, so I've got a little bit more problems than I had when I lived in zone one.
Is that what we passed on the way here? That
It runs right along the side of the house. As soon as you step out, I'll show you. I'll show you where it is.
So they moved you from a lead and arsenic ravaged shithole. Now you're living next to a natural gas pipeline.
Yes, someone knocked at the door and had a book for me, a pamphlet, and told me that he owned this pipeline and that these were, I guess, rules I needed to know of living next to a marathon pipeline, gas line.
What were some of those rules?
I never even looked at the book because I was so nervous about it because I didn't know. I wasn't notified that I lived next door to that, and I felt like that was something that housing should have checked out before they let me move in here because now I'm more concerned about that.
And remind me, I mean, I saw it up close, but it's not like this housing department and the city of East Chicago or the EPA was like, oh my God, you poor people who we moved in here without telling about the lead and whose you and your kids have been having illnesses. Let's get you into a hotel for as long as we can till this is cleaned up. Let's make sure we move you in and test the homes. That housing department in East Chicago pretty much said, go fuck yourself, and didn't really assist you much.
No, we didn't get any assistance. I found my own apartment where I'm at now, with no assistance of the housing authority at all.
And talk about, there were people that were forcefully evicted, forcefully moved to dangerous parts of Chicago. One woman, I think, was moved to Joliet, which is not a safe area, and she was forced to quit her job. Did you hear other stories about people moving in places they didn't want to move to, and as a result, couldn't stay at their jobs and things like that?
Well, I knew about one young lady. They moved from this side of town to the other side of town, with her and her children, her family, and I believe her house was shot up within 24 hours of her and her children being in that home. So these are things that we brought up in the beginning of unsafe areas that we couldn't move our sons, especially our black males, to. It's certain parts of town that I can't move my kids to. So I knew where I had to stay, and that's where I choose to stay on this side of town because I knew it would be safer for me and my children to stay on this side of town versus moving.
So, have they, in Flint, you saw, I have a story I'm working on about this, but they did testing over the years for water. The EPA originally told me in East Chicago it wasn't a water issue. Obviously, 4 months later, it came out that there was lead in the water. But from what I gather, they haven't done citywide testing of the water. They've only done cleanup of soil and things like that, but they haven't tested more than maybe 100 homes.
Well, they haven't tested where I am at. I thought that when we first got the agreement with to move out, that they were going to test for lead, arsenic, and the water to make sure that where we were moving our children to was safe. But to me, they were only concerned about children that were 6 and under. So if you don't have a child under the age of 6, they're not testing to see what are you moving into. And going to the meetings and stuff throughout the year, I found out that this area not only is lead and arsenic, it has cadmium, zinc, and a couple of other things in the soil. So I'm worried. I'm more concerned now because my children left from lead and arsenic. That was the only thing I knew of, and now we're in a whole nother area where there are more contaminants.
And by the way, for the peeps, I'm not being rude. I'm making sure we're getting this video out. So I press the share button and all that. But Sarah says pipelines run all through East Chicago and the towns of Northwest Indiana. Enbridge has tar sands pipelines that come up from Canada here and then up to BP to be refined. And it all goes through the neighborhoods and schools. So essentially, so what's scary about that is you remind the audience your kids have had health issues. You've had a lot of health issues. So you already have health issues that they're not paying for, which we'll get to. And then compounding that, you're moving next to a natural gas pipeline, cadmium, zinc, other things. So essentially, you're going from one upper respiratory nightmare or other issues possibly to another.
Yes, I'm really concerned about my 13-year-old. My 13-year-old is ADHD, asthma, allergies, and he's growing, like I said, at an alarming rate. I'm really concerned about his bones and if everything is okay. I'm really concerned about his lungs, his kidneys, because he was the main one. He was a baby when I moved inside of that complex. So everything that he's done has been inside of that complex. My 19-year-old was playing basketball a couple of days ago. They're trying to figure out what's going on with him. His shoulder just popped out of place. So now we have to see a specialist.
Did he hit another player or just
No,
out of nowhere?
he just was going up for a ball and it completely popped out of place. So we've been seeing a specialist. We already have a slight case of scoliosis where his spine is starting to curve at 19. So not only am I worried about my children, I'm worried about myself. I've graduated from 50% of losing my bone mass to 60% now. So my RA is starting to affect my body even worse being out here. And I'm worried about, is it because of what I'm around?
And I just want to remind the audience, I hate to blow up your spot. So you moved into West Calumet. I think you were in your mid to late 20s.
Yes, I was actually maybe 28, I
Right.
would say.
Didn't have like any major health issues, just here and there, maybe a cold or something. So you moved in there, and then a year later, what happened?
I had my son, my last child in 2004. I moved in the complex May March 1st of 2004. I've had three major surgeries. I had a complete hysterectomy by 2006, which made me 29, and I've been having health problems ever since.
And, you know, like in a nice middle class, upper class place, if this happened, they'd probably get some form of Medicare for all. They'd be delivering smart water bottles here. I mean, the oceans would part, and
The Red Sea.
the people would be treated respectfully, and at least their lives would be made somewhat whole. You're still scrapping for medical coverage for your bills, your kids' bills. It's not like you've gotten any significant assistance with moving and things like that. It's all come out of your pocket.
All came out of my pocket. I think they roughly gave us maybe about $1,100 for the moving, and we were thankful for that. But 500 of that was my deposit that I paid when I moved into the complex. So it's really like nothing. I had enough to rent a U-Haul and move, basically. And then my children and their friends moved me, so I couldn't pay anybody to move me. And a lot of them, I didn't think they understand what happened with us. We lost everything, starting over with the basic things. It wasn't like somebody met us a week or two later and said, well, here are some dishes, or here's some glasses, or here's a voucher to go to the dollar store and just get the basic phone cups, paper plates, things that we left in those houses. And they're still inside of that house. So every time I ride through that complex, it is a reminder of what I left behind. And I'll never be able to get all of that back.
And I assume you had to buy new furniture because your couches and everything were contaminated.
Well, no, I couldn't afford to start over. So what I had done is I had someone to professionally come out and clean my furniture before I moved it in here. I didn't have enough money. They gave us a $2,000 voucher to go to a furniture store, but that was basically just enough to get a bedroom set for one child. I still had another child and myself that I had to basically start all over again with beds, mattresses, just the basics. And they didn't try to help with that. They didn't understand that you go into this one furniture store, that's not a lot. $2,000 isn't nothing. I'm thankful for it, but it wasn't from the city.
And since former Governor Pence, now vice president, since this all happened under him, obviously when he became vice president, more money went to East Chicago, more support, better coordination between the EPA, HUD, because obviously he cared. So that was one of his first priorities, correct?
I don't think so. I still haven't heard from Governor Pence. Well, Vice President Pence now. We haven't heard anything from him. We haven't received any type of support, as I know of, from him. Just even acknowledging what we're going through.
And HUD director Ben Carson, then you had EPA administrator Scott Pruitt. They came down here. Seems like it was a bit of a photo op for me. You could tell me more, but from what I heard, they basically tried to lock out as many residents as possible from the actual meeting. They only allowed certain residents in there, and then at the press conference, they didn't allow residents actually up there. Were you part of that at all? And if you've had any communication with the EPA or HUD, what's that been like?
I was part of both meetings. I guess I was just put in the meeting because I had already had my background security check or whatever they needed to do. I didn't know about them blocking out residents because it was only so many that could fit inside of the room where they had the meeting at to begin with. And plus with everyone and their assistants and their assistants, it wasn't enough room for any other residents. But, I was thinking that something would turn around with both of those meetings, but I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing anything different. I'm just saying they came. That's a check.
Right. It seems to me the most money is not going to medical coverage for people who have had cancers and upper respiratory and behavior issues and mood issues. The most money has been allocated to demolition of the West Calumet complex, which, A, what's the rush, unless you're trying to gentrify the area, and B, they just said, oh yeah, clearance to demolish it, but what about you're going to demolish this and then all of that lead is going to go back up into the air?
And that's what I'm concerned about. It's a lot of senior citizens that own their homes that live right there within that block of that complex. Not even a block. You could just like reach out, maybe two people, and reach across, and you're in the complex. So, what my main concern was, I have a grandmother that lives in zone two, roughly right off from the complex. What is going to happen with her home? Are you coming back? Is EPA going to come back and retest their homes, retest that soil? What are you going to do about those senior citizens in that rehabilitation center that's facing that complex once you start demolishing? Then I was also concerned about who's monitoring the air quality. You know, with you having a child with asthma or any type of respiratory problem, you're going to be worried about, well, what days when the air is blowing, when are they going to tell us? When are we going to be warned that, oh, maybe this might not be a good day to take your child out? Who's going to inform us of that? And I don't even see the need of tearing it down so quickly because you got it locked up. No one's going in there. You got barbed wire all around the gate. So who's going in that complex? And what's the rush? What's the rush? And you got all this money and you haven't tried to make sure at least the city, the closest people in this city have health care. There's no clinics being built around here to test to see what lead and arsenic is doing to our children. Our children haven't been tested for arsenic at all. They were only tested for lead. So that's another thing that I'm worried about. Why haven't they made it mandatory that the children be tested for lead and arsenic? And how many times in a year are they supposed to test our children to see if they're still being affected by this lead and arsenic?
Don't forget bacteria, which has been a problem in Flint and elsewhere. The EPA likes to put their head down when you mention bacteria because that's more money that they'd have to pay out. But it seems to me that essentially they're trying to throw filters at people like they have in Flint and other places. They throw flimsy filters, which actually last like a month. And are pretty much destroyed immediately if you use them in hot water, and maybe some money to move housing, but no significant funds for all your medical costs, no significant funds for things like furniture, things like that, and no significant funds for further testing to make sure if they're moving you from zone 1 to zone 3, you don't have lead in the soil or in the water or whatever. So it basically seems like, all right, we'll throw pennies at them and say, oh, problem solved.
I was kind of upset that they told me because the lead outside the soil didn't test high enough for the cleaning to happen inside. But I just felt like that was a rule that they had set that no matter where you moved to, they were supposed to test the inside of each and every unit that someone moved to from the complex. So I'm kind of upset about that, and I keep raising that up at every EPA meeting. Oh, well, we tested your soil maybe 2 years ago. So I'm like, well, what about the people that live out in Zone 3 that are having their soil retested and having their homes done over again? So how can you tell me I should be okay with you testing it 2 years ago, where these people have had their homes tested 5 years ago, and now you're right back doing the exact same thing you did 5 years ago? I don't feel safe. I still don't feel safe.
And I just want to point out, gentleman, James Belillo, not to blow up your spot, James, but he said you won't get nothing from Republicans. With Republicans, you're on your own. I disagree, James, because I think people need to wake the hell up. This happened under Barack Obama. Flint happened under Barack Obama. Now, is Obama worse than Trump? I don't think so. I don't think so. But is it like things are magically so much better under Democrats? Hell no. The East Chicago mayor is a Democrat.
Yes, he is.
Okay? The East Chicago has had Democratic rule for quite some time. You had a Democratic president pretty much. I never heard Obama say anything on this or come down here, and it happened in the home stretch of his presidency. In Flint, he came down for a photo op. He drank filtered water and said, oh, it's all good. And the bottom line is, you could say, well, he's the president. He's got a lot of other things going on. But the bottom line is, if you have a crisis and you have people living in contaminated crap, contaminated sludge, contaminated air for decades, it's whether you're Obama, Trump, it doesn't matter. It's on you to make it whole. And I'm not going to call it environmental racism. It's just racism. It's in the form of environment, but how they treat you before the revelations came out, during, and now a year later, and it's not just racism, it's class. Because maybe if these were wealthier, there are wealthy black people around the country. I've met them, and they wouldn't be treated this bad either. It's about whether you have money, and you don't have a lobbyist. You don't have a high powered attorney, public relations person.
Yeah.
All you got is yourself, your kids,
Yeah.
couple dollars under your pillow.
Yeah.
Well, looking back a year after this, you've had so many calls with HUD, EPA, Mayor Copeland hasn't responded to you.
No.
What's your overall thoughts that they simply don't care because you're poor?
I think that they came in and they felt like they moved us out of a contaminated area and that was all they needed to do. I don't feel like it hit them the way it should have. That if it was their children, like I said a year ago, if their children were living out there in these different contaminants and these having these health problems, they would have moved their families out years ago. But why is it that they didn't seem to care as much? And a year later, I'm still asking the same thing. What happened to the help? You got $4 million to demolish. You done got $3 million to demolish. What did you break down and try and give to each and every family so that they could be situated? Not $100, not a case of water. I haven't received a case of water in a year from my city. And I felt like that was an insult to each and every resident out here. 90% of the water is contaminated. So why couldn't we get a case of water? A case of water. Fresh fruit, anything. Nothing. A case of water. And I don't think that's asking for much, a case of water.
And the thing is, to this second, I want to make it clear because I put crisis in all caps. People don't, I wouldn't drink the water here, but they're not doing thorough testing. So it is impossible. It is BS to say, oh, no, the water's fine. People here don't know if they could drink the water. Frankly, the EPA doesn't even have regulations for showering and bathing. So who the hell knows what they're bathing or showering in? But the media covered it for 2 seconds, literally 2 seconds. And I think the New York Times did a story after I was first here. I'll take credit for that, even though it's probably not linked. And it's just mind-boggling because it's kind of like this cognitive dissonance. Like, oh, like you said, oh, they moved us out and they're going to demolish it. And they say they're cleaning up the area. But if you have industrial pollution legacy of decades, you can't just clean it up. I mean, it's in the air, it's in the ground,
Yes.
it's probably in the water considering it's come up positive, and they're not doing citywide testing. So kind of how do you feel moving into zone 3? Kind of just maybe a little less scared because you're not in the immediate impact, but still.
I think I'm feeling worse. I think it's worse now because like I said, attending the EPA meetings, I found out they have more stuff in the soil out here than I had out there that I knew of. See, maybe some things that they found in the soil in the complex, they kept quiet. Whereas out here, you can't keep it quiet because a lot of these people own their homes. So they had to tell us, well, part of the truth. I'll put it that way. But it's just, I don't feel any more comfortable out here than I did in zone 1 because I still know that me and my children are being contaminated. But I didn't want to take my son away from the teachers and the good schooling that he's getting where he's at. I didn't want to uproot him and have to move him and try and start all over again because any sudden change could probably cause him to fall back into his old ways. And we can't afford to repeat a grade. We can't afford to, have these outbursts in school and different things that may come with the ADHD. So.
And ADHD, by the way, and behavioral problems and high crime studies have shown high levels of lead cause that. It seems also that, at the end of the day, it's almost like a cover-up. For decades they did not thoroughly test the area. They tested in little hot spots, they call it, but they didn't test the whole complex. They didn't test the majority of the Superfund site. So, okay, the revelations came out, and then again some filters. A little bit of testing, like in Flint, they test certain areas that are newer, probably had less of the problem to begin with, to say, oh, we tested 40 homes and the levels were under 15 parts per billion. Well, what homes did you test? Where were they? Where were they? How old are they? What is their service line made up of? It seems to me like a bit of a cover-up.
Yeah, I think so. I think they knew because it seems like lately, even watching the news, every complex or wherever these areas are, these are the lowest. They seem to put as they say, uneducated, poor, black and brown people in these areas, and I'm not understanding why. But I guess because you didn't pay too much for the land, you don't care about the people that live on it because they don't mean too much to you. And I just felt like it's every day it's a slap in the face to ride past that complex. People don't understand. I didn't plan on being there for the rest of my life, but I didn't plan on being put out because of what someone else did. I had nothing to do with that. But like you said, if we were in a more wealthier area, they would have had clinics open. They'd have been studying us from the top of our heads to the bottom of our feet, and we haven't had that done. And that's wrong.
And how do you feel? I don't want to say that the media shouldn't cover, the president's awful statements, awful policies. After the Charlottesville terror attacks, obviously he tried to dog whistle and, oh, they're nice guys out there with torches. But I feel like the media covers verbal racism very, very strongly. But modern day to day racism like this, crickets.
Yeah. They looked over it. Everybody was a hot subject when it first happened. So everybody, come, let's go to East Chicago. Let's go to East Chicago. Now all of a sudden you see, oh, well, HUD, this one went to visit East Chicago. It's not really seeming like it matters anymore. You don't see it covered. But I thank you for coming back. And I thank you for staying consistent with us and even Flint and now St. Louis. It's just.
You could thank my doctor because my back's broken.
Yeah, I thank you for always coming back and keeping your word every time.
Don't forget Ty Bayless behind the camera.
And thanks, Ty. Young ladies, yeah, thank Ty. You all need to see Ty, but
Well, the truth, I appreciate it, but honestly, this is what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to, chase clicks and follow endlessly the president's tweets and all that. You're supposed to expose corruption, expose injustice, and if you do it right, put some people in jail or bring some justice to people. And I think, unfortunately, the rest of the media only goes somewhere when the conflict is obvious and the sensationalism is obvious. Well, to me, it's fairly obvious that you just look around. Me and Ty were driving around, and I said, "Wow, this is a real shithole. This area. No offense." And it seems to me that they chose. All right, we gotta make our industry. We have to be industrialized and kind of put our toxic plants and processes somewhere. So let's just put it where the black people live, or the poor Latinos. That's what this area seems to me.
that's what it seems like because a lot of us can't afford to just up and move. Like I said, my grandmother's been in zone 2 in the same home for 64, 65 years. She's not leaving her home. This is what we have to deal with. So I didn't want to be too far away from my grandmother and taking my children too far away from school, my 13-year-old, from where they're used to. So, and then I just thought about it. I'm already contaminated. So me leaving East Chicago, is it going to lessen my chance of having lead? If it's already in my bones or it's in my organs, me moving away is not going to change anything in my body.
And just to be clear, I mean, you're 40, early 40s, 41. You're disabled. You can't work.
Can't work. Can't work. 41 disabled. I've been fully disabled since about 2007, 2008. Really not able to do the things that I'm used to doing. Not being able to always provide for my kids. You don't qualify because I'm on disability. I don't qualify for food stamps. These are things that people don't realize. Everything I do comes out of my pocket. I don't have it like that. If I had it to move away and do better, I would. But I can't leave here. My family's here. My family home is here. And leaving here would be like, just walking away from everything. Because being 45 or 35 minutes away from my grandmother, if she needs me, if she falls or anything happens with her, you need somebody that can be right there. The only thing separating us now is the train tracks. I'm within walking distance to get to her if it's an emergency. Or I can stop somebody and get a ride to my grandmother. If I'm all the way out in Maryville, Portage, or somewhere, it'll take me 45 minutes to get to my grandmother.
Right.
And she's going to be 85 years old real soon, in a couple of days.
And to be clear, the EPA, HUD, Health and Human Services, no government department has said a damn word or agreed to Medicare for all, expanded Medicaid, none of that for the residents of East Chicago.
None of that. We haven't heard anything. And it's sad because a lot of the issues that we're going through aren't our fault.
None of the issues
None
are your
of the
fault.
issues, but the majority of the health issues aren't our fault. and there's nothing we can do about it. And it's really bad when your children are suffering. As a parent, you take on whatever you have to take on. But now, I have to make an appointment with a dentist because I'm starting to lose the bones in my teeth. I'm losing teeth. These are things that people don't realize. The lead has been in me for 40 years.
It's interesting you say that because I won't blow up her spot, but mother in Flint,
Yeah.
because health and even getting your teeth pulled is so expensive in America. Literally drove with her kids to Mexico from Flint, Michigan, to get teeth pulled because the lead, like you said, is causing your teeth to come out.
Yeah, and there's nothing I can do about it. I can't afford even to just go to a dentist. They told me it would be at least $300 just to do the basic cleaning and treatments that I need. So who has extra $300? I have to choose between getting my teeth cleaned or done or feeding my children. And I'm going to always feed my children. I'll just deal with whatever I have to deal with. But they don't understand. A lot of people in the world do not understand what single parents go through. And I'm going through a lot. And it's still stressful even a year later. Nothing's changed. My stress level is still high. My worrying is still high. Nothing's changed in a year. And no one's lending a helping hand either.
Well, also, you gotta. I don't want to scare you, but you gotta think about like what are you sitting on right now.
Yeah.
So like they didn't tell you, and because they didn't test thoroughly when you were in that complex, they certainly aren't testing these homes thoroughly. This is a legacy polluted area. There was lead plants, steel plants, insecticide plants, more toxic shit going out in the air into the soil than you could imagine. I believe East Chicago was called the most industrialized city in America a couple decades ago. So you put poor black and brown and people here, uh, and the numbers come out again. Filters, some pennies and nickels, uh, to help them move, even though they didn't help them, and that's about it. And I think you could point, some people talk about Trump, and obviously Trump's not going to help them. But remember, all of this stuff happens because our government does not represent its people. If the government represented the people and there was not money in politics, they would be aiding these folks. But the problem is the same companies that polluted this area, the same companies that caused her suffering and her family's suffering, are the same companies giving them money. And that's what it comes down to. Flint, East Chicago, North Carolina, where we covered the water contamination, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Milwaukee. I mean, I can't keep up. I really can't. I'm getting messages on Facebook constantly. You got to come cover this water thing, this mining story. I mean, I'm only one person, so I can't. Sorry. But it's all about corporate greed and the government that has stopped representing its people. Ty, your thoughts?
You silly. No, I think you're absolutely right. I think what you said earlier also is what they do. I think that's the mentality because how, like I told you, me growing up in Compton and Ujima Village complex, they moved everyone out also because they found that it was contaminated when they tried to, I think it was in 2005, they tried to sell it, found out it wasn't livable, and they ended up pushing everyone out. But I think that's exactly, they feel because maybe people are low income and they can't afford it or it's free housing that it doesn't matter where we put it. At least they should be grateful that they have a place to stay. Like why are you complaining? And they look at you as less than human, and less than people. I think it's a shame. I also think it's a shame that a year later we're still here. I'm baffled that you moved and in a place that is contaminated still. When we first put up, I was like, oh, this is nice. This looks better than where you were. And to know that it's contaminated also, I don't. Where's the logic in that? Why are we moving if I'm going to another place that I can have the same health issues and the same contamination and the same worries about your. I remember you were speaking about your 13-year-old the last time we were here because I was telling you that I had ADHD also, and when you said that when we were talking about the causes of that and that led and thinking about that there was lead in Compton where I was raised, and that kind of makes sense. Like, what else could happen? You know, why do you have to be constantly worried about something? You know, trick because lead really does give you behavioral issues. You know, and the continuing of drinking it and inhaling it and ingesting it will probably make things worse and intensify. Like it's baffling for you to have to all day, every day, sit and worry. Okay, is something else gonna happen? Is something else gonna happen? You know, and with your health, with your teeth. When you said your teeth, it just reminded me of Flint because everyone talks about how their teeth falls out in Flint. Everyone talks about that. So like my teeth is falling out, my hair is falling out, you know, in Flint, and that's crazy. You shouldn't have to worry about that. You shouldn't have to choose between health care or feeding your family. You know, they should that should be a part of anything. If they know that they have to move you out because the some complex was contaminated that they put you in, then they should assume responsibility for your health care from this day forward. Right?
Right. I agree. But that's not what's going to happen so far.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's
It's
crazy.
just sad also that my 13-year-old, I recently received some paperwork from him stating that back in 2007 he tested at a level 9 for his lead.
Wow.
And this was something that an attorney had to go in and get for me. This is nothing that was given to me prior.
Wow.
So,
So they was withholding information.
yeah, saying that the Board of Health had tested his blood, and I didn't know anything about it. We've never been to the Board of Health.
Yeah. Wow.
So, it's a lot.
That's crazy.
It's a lot. It is crazy.
Wow.
What can people do to help?
I think we need to start by writing our legislative and make them change some rules and regulations about health care. You know, making maybe some of the dollar amounts that people have, the incomes, making some changes that we could qualify for Medicaid.
Yeah.
Because I don't qualify for Medicaid. I have Medicare through my disability insurance.
Yeah.
But they also could help by, you know, the same way we're donating to people that are going through different hurricanes and different things, they need to set up something for people to donate water here.
Yeah.
And I think we need to start with our mayor and our political officials and make them do
When is his
something.
term up?
I'm not sure, but
You should find
soon.
out because you guys have to. You really should mobilize. You know, because you can get them out of office if they're not concerned with their constituents and the issues that they're having. You know, a lot of times they think that we don't vote. They think poor people, black people, poor whites, poor Hispanics, they don't vote. So we're not going to be worried about whatever they're going through. Whatever they upset, they're upset. They don't take the time to get on vote. You have to. If it seems like that's the way. Let them know you will vote their ass out of office and get someone that will address the issues that you all deal with. Like that's what you have to do. You have to mobilize and get these people voting and make sure they're voting and let them know that a lot of people, because you know some people I know I had a record and for a while I couldn't vote, and what happens is you get used to not voting, so you never vote. And you have to like let them know that you can vote. There's some ways. Sometimes you can vote after you get off parole or probation. Sometimes if it's 7 years, if it's been 7 years since you committed a felony, you can vote. Like these are things that people in communities like this need to know because this is the type of community that I grew up in, and I don't think any of my friends growing up ever voted. I don't know if they vote now. I haven't seen them, but I didn't vote. The first time I voted was in 2016. It was the first time. That's the honest truth because I always thought that I couldn't vote because of that felony, you know?
Right.
And then I figured out that I could, and so I started. But that's what happens. You get used to it. So you have to make sure because they don't think you're a threat. That's why they're doing this. What city was it that this was happening and Pence like they
Kokomo.
stopped it, huh?
Oh, in Kokomo, Greenwood, Indiana.
You know why? Cuz he like, oh, they're going to vote. They're they think they know who you are. You need to show them something else. And let them know that your vote count and you're going to vote and you should be worried about me.
I try to make them know that I vote and try and get people out. You know, when I went to DC, I let people know where I was from. I made sure I wore a T-shirt every day with East Chicago, Indiana, to let them know where I was coming from. But we don't have the numbers.
Yeah.
We have to get on one accord with the numbers with the people. We're
Yeah.
separate.
Yeah.
You have blacks against blacks, Latinos against Latinos. We're all separate. Nobody is on one accord, and nobody's on one accord, and that's going to continue to be a problem until we all come together and try and figure out that nobody's trying to get no more than you.
Yeah.
We're all doing this for the same cause. But as long as we have people thinking that, oh, they're trying to do this because they want to be noticed more, no, no, because if I'm suffering, we all suffering.
Exactly.
There's no difference. They think, oh, well, she does this and does this, but you don't know what I sacrificed to do what I do. I sacrificed a whole lot to make sure that my children get out and be able to go different places. I sacrifice. But, you know, not being able to say, okay, she didn't feed her kids every day, or I feed my kids, but to say that we have something set aside if something happens, I don't have that.
Yeah.
One incident could happen and it could just I don't know where we're going.
Yeah. Wow.
They didn't give us nothing to fall back on. You know, it would have been nice to say, okay, well, since we caused all this, let's try and set up at least $1,000 for a college fund for some of these kids.
Yeah.
You know, try and have something for our kids to look forward to. We have nothing to look forward to
Yeah.
because nobody really realized how much I left, how much each and every mother left in those homes.
Yeah.
And we're still trying to recoup from that. And no one understands. They think, oh, well, they're out, they're doing better. No, we're not.
Well, let me tell you, the biggest trick that the elite has done is to pit poor people against each other. To think that if one get it, that I'm not going to get it, or they're taking something from me. Like, that's the biggest trick they do, because if you're busy fighting each other, you can't fight against the oppressor. And the oppressor is these governments and these corporations that's trying to privatize everything. That's the reason. That's the reason why the DACA situation is going on, and all, because everyone gets paid. These are all contracts. The plane that has to fly immigrants to Mexico, that's a contract. The bus that brings them in, that's a private contract. These pipelines, those are private contracts. These are all things that's privatized that the elite are doing to go against, and they don't care what happens to you, because they can deal with it. They can drag you out in court for years because they have the money to do it, because they don't care about you. Don't allow them to play that trick on you at all. You guys need to mobilize, come together. There's always going to be differences. There's always going to be differences, but what you guys need to do is understand your differences and come for the cause, you know? And that cause is to make sure that people in office are looking out for your interests, not the interests of their donors, not the interests of of lobbyists. You have to. That's the only way we're going to get past it, because if you guys continue to be preoccupied with kind of clawing and scratching at each other, they're going to continue to be poisoning you. Right?
And that's going to continue to happen until we get on one accord.
Exactly.
Have you spoken to or coordinated with any of the Flint activists?
I talked to Melissa Mays. I think we're friends on Facebook, but I haven't talked to her in a minute because I've been going through my own little personal things right now. But I do follow her every day on Facebook. I watch her countdown of every day that they've been going through the things with the water. I follow her with each and every rally she attends or any meetings that she attends. Whatever she says, I follow her almost every day. So I've been following her since I met her at the Ameristar when she came here.
And tell them we'll put up some stuff on the YouTube page for how people can help.
So yeah, we'll put up some information. Is there any information you have right now on how people can help, where they can send money for water and things like that you were speaking of? Do you guys have a website set up or a GoFundMe, anything of that nature?
No, we haven't set up anything as of yet, but I can get that information back to you.
Yeah, you should, absolutely. And so we're gonna have more videos. I almost sound like Jordan for a second, But we'll have more videos of this later, and we'll put the information up on where you can donate if you would like to donate. Again, follow us on Facebook, TYT Politics, and YouTube, TYT Politics. Peace.